We all know that the state of Maryland has set very ambitious goals to achieve future clean energy mandates of zero carbon emissions by the year 2045. The magnitude of such a goal is daunting since the development of wind and solar energy sources are insufficient to meet the growing needs of our highly connected world. Hydropower seems to have its own negative consequences as well. So few know that, and the few know that 80% of the green energy produced in our state comes from the Calvert nuclear power plant that was built in 1975. And now even the environmental community is taking a second look at going nuke. And for the first time since 1979, when the movie The China Syndrome, describing a fictional scenario where reactor components melt through their containment structures into the underlying Earth, all the way to China. And there was a crisis at the 3 Mile Island nuclear facility in Pennsylvania, resulting in the worst commercial nuclear accident in U.S. history, caused by a partial meltdown of the reactor. We are now looking at nukes for maybe our future energy needs. Mike, it's interesting that Baltimore-based Constellation Energy has proposed restarting that very same 3 Mile Island nuclear plant to power the demands of artificial intelligence, because there's such a high demand for energy now. Is that a wise decision?
I think it is. I mean, I think when we tend to talk about transportation a lot on this show, and oftentimes we end up with the conclusion that, we need to be doing everything to address our transportation issues. It's not roads, it's not transit, it's try to come up with a comprehensive solution. And I think when you look at clean energy and renewable energy, it's a similar approach. And so I think, to your point, solar and wind don't get everything that we need. I think nuclear is already doing a lot in the state. And I think that when you look at the challenges and the demands that we have for infrastructure to support data warehousing, AI, and various other things, and we see what greenhouse gas emissions can do and what the challenge and the energy requirements are, I think looking at nuclear makes a lot of sense. And I think just reading the other day from some of the folks who live adjacent to 3 Mile Island in the local communities, that outside of what was a very visible and a very unfortunately non-transparent challenge that they had to face in 1979 and did poorly, that in the time after that, when it operated for a number of years, it was a great employer, provided great wages, provided strong energy for the community. And so I think when you look at that and we take it with a fresh approach, I think nuclear provides a pretty good option, in addition to the other sources that we're looking at.
Well, Mark, the state of Georgia this past year opened up 2 new large-scale nuclear plants, and they began operating. And is it time to consider the same here in Maryland?
Well, hopefully we can in Maryland do it more economically than it was done in Georgia. The Georgia plants went way over budget by something, up to $35 billion, which is, I think, close to 3 times what the original estimate was. That, no doubt, is a function of the fact that we are restarting the construction industry, at least of large reactors. So it may make more sense to sort of get our feet wet, so to speak, with the restart of 3 Mile Island and adjacent facilities from existing nuclear power plant. But this is actually a continuation of the conversation we had about buses, which is that energy decisions need to be grounded in economics, sound economics, and not just aspiration. And the numbers need to pencil out that we can get reliable energy at a cost that we can afford.
Well, I think what's changed the conversation a little bit is the growing demands of artificial intelligence and the realization that we're not meeting our projected energy demands for the future. And so we're now looking at a different alternative. And I'm just, I've always been a proponent of safe, clean nuclear energy. And the technology has developed over the past 45 years, to now taking a look at it. I mean, I'd amend the 2050 Montgomery plan to include nuclear.
You want to put a nuclear plant up where Dickerson is?
I'd like to. Frankly, I'd like to put it in my backyard.
Yeah, and actually, that's one of the encouraging technologies are not necessarily the large plant that was built in Georgia, but are smaller nuclear plants that can be developed. Now, obviously, we may grow from there, but that is definitely an option worth considering.
And we
Well,
have
I
some,
think
we have some,
I
we have
think
some companies here in Montgomery County that are actually leading some of that smaller development and innovation, which is pretty cool. I think it's exciting. I think it's important, to your point, Casey, that as we are trying to figure out how to address these demands and these needs, that what becomes old is new, and we become somewhat innovative. The other piece is too that some of the challenges in both the China syndrome and what they saw on 3 Mile Island was the technology, but it was also the inability to communicate and be transparent what was happening with that technology as it was happening. And so it made it much more of a crisis. Not that it wasn't one, but when people weren't clear on the information that was being shared, that made that crisis ratchet up even significantly more.
Well, we not only our own 3 Mile Island, but Chernobyl and the Japanese nuclear disaster that happened. So, I mean, safeguards have to be in place, and redundancy of safeguards have to be in place in order to make this viable. But the encouraging thing is that you can, as Mark just described, go lower scale and find, and reap the benefits from a lower scale project as opposed to the large scale projects.